that's the joyful journey of this whole experience, is all of the miracles and mysteries that are going to unfold for all of us that we could have never saw coming.
When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and claim the potential inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome back to the Vital Point podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. As a transformation coach and breathwork facilitator, I'm invested in making the dynamic landscape of personal evolution accessible. My goal is to inspire you to take action for yourself. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world. There's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to transform your life and share the stories of practitioners who are doing the work so you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. Welcome to this amazing episode. My guest on today's show is Kat Walsh. Kat is a podcast host, entrepreneur, seeker, and trip companion, as well as just an amazing human being. She's the creator and host of the Psychedelic podcast Trip on This, as well as the podcast Life with Kat Walsh, which is a solo personal journal style podcast centered around her awakening journey and her life. Trusting the intuition was really a focus of the conversation today. We really got into some psychedelic stuff, but the psychedelics kind of weaved in and out of the conversation, and really kind of focused on that trust. And the trust isn't always something that is happening in our head. It's not something that we have to do, as opposed to a way of being, something that happens within the body. Trusting that everything is working out exactly the way that it's supposed to, that everything is working out for your highest good, and that the intuition that you have that's pushing you in a certain direction or pulling you to explore something, or take a chance, or to send a text or not send a text, what to buy at the grocery store, that all these things are a part of trusting ourselves, trusting that intuitive voice within. And that the more that we cultivate the relationship with that intuitive voice, the more that we learn to hear it, really feel it in the body, the more loudly that voice will speak to you, the more that you'll learn to trust that voice, to trust that feeling. And so this came through in a variety of different ways throughout the conversation. It's truly a pleasure to talk with Kat. She offers an amazing practice that you can start to use to cultivate the relationship with that intuitive voice. Trusting your intuition, being able to connect with that sense in the body that knows the right direction, that knows when things are feeling good or when they just don't feel right, when that contraction starts to happen. It's such a key for integration. It's such a key for working with psychedelics and plant medicine. And for me, that sense, that awareness has come through my mindfulness practice, as well as developing somatic awareness and somatic experiencing. And so this is one of the reasons that these are such important aspects to my coaching offerings, because in order to really get the most from our psychedelic work, we really have to be connected to that sense, right? We have to know if there is a pull. Is it something that I want to continue to explore? Is it coming from that place of intuition and wholeness and joy? Or is it coming from a smaller place, a place of contraction, a place of fear or not knowing? So if this is resonating, if you're feeling like exploring this further, I'd love to chat with you to see if coaching is a good fit for continuing our journey together. You can reach out, set up a free discovery call, and happy to chat about how I can support you on your journey. So, hope you enjoy this conversation with Kat Walsh. Hey, Kat Walsh, welcome to the Vital Point podcast.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's so good to be here.
Yeah. So we were talking before we just hit record about, trusting our intuition. So I'm just going to go ahead and trust my intuition about where to hop in.
Mhm.
And that is like maybe starting with like something recent as far as psychedelic experiences and like what was so memorable about that and how are you integrating it?
Yeah, that's a great question because I actually have a big experience that I had to integrate. And I say had to, I got to, but it wasn't necessarily, it was actually like probably the most difficult trip I've ever had in my life, this most recent
Mm,
one. Um, so and I always like to say, like, before I talk about this experience, because I want to tell everybody like the truth of it, but also psychedelics have changed my life. I'm definitely going to be going back, you know what I mean? Like, I have a psychedelic podcast, but it's a great, I think it was a great lesson for me, and it actually allows me to, I feel like, speak about when people talk about bad trips, like, oh, okay,
mm,
so I like really understand like how challenging they can be sometimes, right? And I thought I had the right
right.
set and setting. So I'll dive into that a little bit. So I've done heroic journeys before. I've done a 5 gram mushroom trip in the dark. My largest trip, I did like a 9.25 gram of like a very strong mushroom. And that was also like awesome. And then like at the end, I was like, okay, it got a little like I did it alone. So I kind of wish I had the support on that. Um,
Mm,
and this time I was house sitting and I just felt very guided to do another large journey. So I was just told like do everything in that jar. I was like everything, and so I trusted that. I thought I was going to do like a 3 gram. That's usually my favorite, I guess, like trip experience because I'm still kind of like in. I'm not completely, like it's not so immersive, but like it's also an absolute psychedelic trip, right? But when they said like do the whole, and when I say they, my intuitive voice, which is like I'm in constant communication with, it was like, okay, so do this whole thing. And I was like, okay, this is like trust again, right? Like trusting that. And it ended up being 6.9 grams of mushrooms that I had grown. And so I do them. And the trip itself was the first time I experienced an ego death. And
mm,
what was so wild about it is that I could have never understood what an ego death was prior to this. Like, I kept, especially as somebody with a psychedelic podcast, I kept wanting to like understand, like, what is it actually to have an ego death experience? Like, I always like to say that part of my mind has a very strong hold on not wanting to let go. Letting go in a psychedelic trip has always been a journey for me, really. And so as I'm going through this, it kind of started with like, it started great and beautiful. I got tons of like very important downloads for myself. And then I ended up getting a little nauseous. I had fasted also during this. And that nausea then led to just kind of like this growing discomfort and this growing like unease in myself, and I couldn't quite pinpoint it. And I'm sitting on this couch and it's just getting now more and more. And mind you, typically when you do like a 6.9 gram experience, people lay down, they close their eyes, they're going inwards. That's not what I did on
sure.
this experience. I wanted it to be like that like a choose your own adventure. Like I wanted to see what it looked like at 6.9 grams. I wanted to just let myself be guided to what I wanted to do in every now moment. And so uh it probably, I mean, no accidents because there's so much to the integration point. I just want to set this up properly before I get to like kind of what the learnings were. Um Basically that unease became like almost like an alarm to me. I was sitting on the couch being like, what is happening to me? Like I couldn't even quite comprehend what was so uncomfortable for myself. And I felt like I was like kind of like losing it. I was like, what is happening? Like I just don't know. I don't know what's wrong. I can't place it. Little did I know my ego was becoming like dissolved, but it didn't just like happen, right? So it's like it was almost this like for the ego, it felt like a looming threat because
Sure.
somehow there was something coming that was going to like, to it completely dissolve it. And that part of ourself that wants to survive is like, what is happening? I literally, Jonathan, I jump in the pool, not like in the deep end, but like in the shallow end, because I'm starting to be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, like what's happening? What's happening? Jump in the pool. That doesn't work. I get in the shower and I'm just sitting in the water, just like hoping it goes away. I'm going to every possible, it's now getting at the height of my peak. And I was losing all concept of myself. So now I'm losing all like self concept. I couldn't, I was like, no one can help me. I wouldn't even know how to ask for help in this now moment. Like, I didn't understand that I was having an ego death until after. I didn't know
Mm.
in when it was happening. So I was like, what? I literally check this out. It gets so cosmic in this. I get out of the shower. I'm in like full panic mode. I just kind of like sit on the floor and all of a sudden I completely black like wipe out. But just for like one moment, my entire it almost felt like the best way I would describe it is that I was a computer, right? And somebody like basically all the mushrooms and spirit had been giving me the option to, go up to Apple, shut down properly, let go, right? Do that whole process. But because my
Right.
own ego was so strong, it basically like came over to the power button and just like was like hard resetting me. And
Yeah.
I after that hard reset, and I just literally like would just wipe out for a second, like everything. I just was like gone for a moment. I was like, whoa. And then I like flop myself on the bed and I'm in complete serenity suddenly. Like it is serene. I'm calm. All I know is like, I'm so thrilled to be back, like in myself. And this voice, um, which was part of the downloads that I was receiving, the voice was basically like, you know, we're basically the process that whatever that needed to happen um like basically the messages that I received was to think of myself as like that I had a lot of cachet and cookies on myself coming back to like technology, right? Like a computer
Uh-huh.
analogy. They were using a
Right.
lot of like computer analogies with me and they were like you had like basically on your soul and your consciousness itself there was a lot of um, like malware, if you will, that is not allowing you to step into all that you are. And so I'm having this like otherworldly now stream of consciousness coming in. And basically, like the voice was like, we're sorry that had to be so um, traumatic for the human version of yourself, but it's
Yeah.
for you. This was for you. Like, like don't even try to understand it now. Don't even try to the minds can never understand what happened here, but just trust that um this was a prayer that was answered for you because I won't go into all of what my intentions were, but and so I did. And all I knew was there was something divine about it anyway, because I went from straight up hysteria in one moment to like I'm out for literally 1 second to complete calm, serenity, peace, and a massive wave of otherworldly, calm, loving message. And I was like, okay. Now, obviously, I'm like, the way first I was like thrilled after and I was like, oh my God, I'm just thank God I'm back. Oh my God. Later that night, I just wept for myself. I just cried. Um, I just cried for myself. And I said, like, that, even though maybe if it was like for me, right? That still was the scariest thing I've ever experienced because I just thought like Kat was gone. Like, and, and so I allowed the human to cry, and not trying to like over talk like, oh, that was good. That was good. That was for you. I was like, no, no, no. Acknowledge the part that was like absolutely terrified. And it was a really, really important part of my journey. And it took like 3 or 4 days after that experience to kind of like get back into myself. It was definitely, um, like it I was a little off for the 3 or 4 days. Like I was okay, but like trying to get my feet under me because of such an experience that like could never kind of be explained. Like I did my best, but like it kind of
Right.
impossible to know unless you have it. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the most wild part though about that is one, it solidified why I do psychedelics, and it actually helped arm me with when I speak with people, when I guide people, because I guide people on mushroom trips as well, when I am with people, that I understand the depths of how scary it can be, actually, to be able to hold them, to know it, right? Like yourself. And to
Yeah.
also know the height of beauty, the height of love and bliss and self-confidence and self-worth, right? And so to now be able to hold these two experiences within myself really actually empowered me to be able to feel like I could speak from it from a more um yeah, from a place of just like real knowing and not just information I've heard. And so that's kind of the latest bit.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I could really hear it in your voice towards the end, especially when you were talking about that beauty and kind of how that's continuing to have an impact on you, and can definitely relate to a lot of what you just shared, down to some of the sort of almost physical description. Um, so yeah, I'm curious about how that's continued to integrate for you, especially as far as your work goes.
Yeah, you know what? It's less the integration for this particular one is less mental, and
Mm,
it has been everything after this journey, everything has started to open up for me. And so the thing that I can say is reg- whatever the that cache clear out is, clearing out the cookies in my own
right.
psyche, my own soul, my own consciousness, whatever it was, I have been able to see myself and my own worth so much clearer. I'm in the process of putting together like multiple different avenues, business avenues for myself to not only support myself to live in the world, but completely aligns with what I want to be doing. They're actually also similar and in different ways. I'm in the process right now of Trip on This is done recording for season 3. So I'm just using these next 2 weeks to just get everything edited and scheduled and, kind of uh, off my plate, if you will, and let just Trip on This now do its thing. Like, that's my podcast for those listening, let it just kind of live and continue to do its thing and allow me to focus on the things that I never had clarity for. I always knew when I went on this journey, I said to myself, here's what I always knew from like that higher download, if you will, that higher intuitive voice was, Trip on This is just one small piece of what you do, Kat. There is something more that you're creating, and it's much, much larger than you can even like imagine at this moment in time. And I always
Mm,
trusted that. I really always got that. Like, I was like, I know, but like, I just don't know what else to do. And in this last month, I guess, month and a half since that experience, everything has been clarifying around, you know, actually understanding like what my value is, how to create like how to create an actual material value for myself now in this world. Because I think I went through a lot of imposter syndrome before, and it was hard for me to just like step in and claim it, and you know and yeah, it feels like the universe is like, anything you want you can have. And it's just a really
mm,
profound feeling to not only like really know it, but to just like know it within myself. Like I feel it everywhere, that anything that I want to do, I can do, and that the people that I want to work with, I can work with. And that there's just so much opportunity coming now, and just allowing myself to receive it, and to be able to see myself um, clearly. Because I think that's the journey, right? The more that we can love ourselves, the more self-worth that we experience for ourselves, the more that we create, because we believe we can, because we believe that people will believe in our vision, because we believe that people will join our vision if they, you know what I'm saying? So it's like all of these pieces. And so it's been remarkable, it's like I have to, it's not like a direct one to one, like I received this message and this happened, but I can tell you everything has been different since.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, and let me know if I'm getting you right, is like there's a, along with the intuition and the trust is the love, right? And like when we're doing something, looking for something outside of ourselves, when we're like looking for somebody else's approval or somebody else's love or acceptance, whatever that is, then there's always like this sort of grasping,
Hmm.
right? Because like we're trying to fill something up within ourselves, even if we're not really like aware on that deep level. But like when you're coming from that place of love and trust in yourself and in your intuition, it everything is going to come out perfectly. Like
Hmm.
you don't have to worry about like, oh no, is this going to work out, is this person going to like me, because you're just in your own power, you're in your own body and in your own vision. And so whatever happens, even if like there's a sort of a curveball that comes out of nowhere and like takes you off of that path that you thought you were on, you're still like, okay, well, this is just part of the journey, right? Like I didn't see this coming, but it's all part of it,
Hmm. Trusting that you're like, oh yeah, well, that
Yeah.
was always meant to happen. I mean, when you really can
Right.
anchor that, the idea that like whatever happens was always meant to be, and whatever doesn't was never ever meant to be, then it kind of releases the what if, and I should have done this, and you're like, no, no, whatever happened, like literally, like that was always meant to be. And so it helps release the fear of I missed an opportunity, I missed whatever. Like it's just like
Mm.
it was never yours to begin with, because if it was, it would be, And I love your point about the
Right.
whole self-love aspect, because I think that is fundamentally the human journey, is understanding like what it is to actually like love ourselves, and not just in a I look pretty today, and um but
Right.
like all the ways that we, you know looking at all the ways we might dishonor ourselves, our body. Like, I used to be so disconnected from how I was actually feeling. I'd be exhausted, my body's like, please go to bed, and I'm like, more coffee. And I was like, that is that is
Mm-hmm.
that a way to is that love for yourself? Like, is that a loving gesture to do when you're exhausted, and all you do is then just ignore what is being asked of you, Kat, from yourself,
Mm.
from the highest aspect of
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And so I think that to me is been that was the journey that ayahuasca put me on, with self-love. My intention for that journey was actually put me on the path I'm supposed to be. Ayahuasca was like, uh, you know, I love you, as in myself, right? And through
Right.
that, through the curriculum of self-love, I stepped into, oh, did you know you could be entrepreneurial? Did you know that you actually are quite good at communicating, and that people could, have you been looking at yourself all along? You had
Right.
told yourself a story about how you're not an entrepreneur, that you're a work to live person, and
Mm.
like all this stuff,
Mm.
because you just you weren't seeing yourself clearly, like maybe other people do. Because I remember, for me, I told a lot of my friends what I was going to be doing with my podcast, and I guess, truly to my surprise, no one was surprised. Everyone was like, "Of course. I mean, that's a natural fit, Kat. Like, absolutely." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay, thank you." So it's oftentimes so people can see us clearer than we can actually see ourselves. But if we can't see it, then we're not going to really like act on it. And I think that's the journey, though. I mean, I think the entire time that we're here, it's going to be like, how deeply do you love? How deeply do you trust that you're supported? How deep is your faith that you're going to land where you need to land?
Totally. Yeah. I say a version of that, a lot to clients, and I have to remind myself of it as well. It's like would I be talking to a client the way that I'm talking to myself right now? And the answer is absolutely no, because
Yeah.
they would walk out, they'd tell me where to go. Right. And just reflecting on that of like, why is it so much easier for me to give that to somebody else than it is to give that to myself and to receive that
Mhm.
from myself, right? To and I think you're speaking to this, this entrepreneurial expansion,
Mhm.
right? um the sort of through line to that, or the subtext, is that these things are challenging, right? Like we don't just get up. I think there's some people that do, right? And I'm always like really amazed by those people that are just like, I'm a natural born entrepreneur. It's like, wow, what is that like?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I am fighting myself every step of the way sometimes, in terms of like having to trust and like getting my nervous system used to a different routine and a different path and a different level of risk and trust in that process,
Mhm.
and that I'm on the right path, and oftentimes I think like when we're looking at people on Instagram or social media or whatever, and we're seeing those highlights and those successes, that's, oh my God, it must be so easy for them. And why is it so difficult for me?
Mhm.
When what you're speaking to is sort of the growth, there is growing pains, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
stepping into that takes work and takes trust. And there's something about that, I hear it all the time. Like, and I guess I'm feeling proud that I'm starting to hear that in my life now, like where people are looking at me and saying, oh wow, like you're doing what I want to do, or like
Yeah.
you're living my dream. I don't know how you're doing that. And I'm like, you can do it too. It's not easy for me. Like this has taken me a long time and a lot of work to get where I'm at. And I'm still feel like I'm growing and learning,
Mhm.
So good for you for like trusting that and being able to step into that.
I had thank you, and I'm glad to hear you on your own journey as well. And I think it's easy, like and it is a kudos though, because for yourself where you were before and where you are today,
Mm,
right? Like
mm-hmm,
having those look backs at yourself and being like, damn, you know what? I'm so proud of you. Like that this hasn't been easy, and like you're doing it. And it doesn't always like
right.
look pretty. And oftentimes it would stick me on the floor crying and like
Right.
second guessing everything, and am I out of my mind, and like all of that. Like I think everybody has to
Mm,
go through like that process, but I think if we all know that that is part of the process, and it's just quite literally the process of becoming, then it's less scary when it's you having it happen, or the person it, because like you said, like not having that kind of glossy uh, vision of success like on social media. And I have a second podcast called Life with Kat Walsh, and it's literally just about the truth of the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of just living in the world differently, and trying to really putting my trust and my faith in the unseen. That's a very radical idea, to
mm.
listen to the voice in your heart when your mind is very very loud, and we've been taught such my dad always says like dollars and cents, but sense, right? Like
Uh-huh.
if it
Right.
doesn't look practical, then that's you know it's kind of like looked down upon. And so then trusting in something kind of that is unproven, if you will. And uh it's a whole journey to go through that. And so I talk about that quite a bit, just all of it, highs, the lows, and just like, yeah, because I think we all need to hear that. We need to hear it so that people don't think they're doing it wrong on this path.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What if you had to sort of distill it down into maybe like the most important thing to develop, or to sort of integrate, to start to trust that intuition, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to say, is, I this is like a silly sports analogy, but it's like the thing that's coming to me about that like inner voice, right? And we all have it, right? So I think of that inner voice, that it's more quiet. It's the voice that knows what we need to do. It's not always
Mm.
the thing that we want to do, but it knows what we need
Hmm.
to do, right? Like whether it's
Yeah.
a relationship that's not working, whether it's a job that's, not for you, whether it's anything. We kind of know, and then we can either complicate it for ourselves, and the mind can come in and really argue for either side. Um, but I think of like that inner voice, right, as like a ringer on a team. This is like the best player you could possibly imagine. It's like this is a home run hitter that literally knows exactly what it's doing. But we keep, for whatever reason, putting in this like kind of loudmouth, uh, mediocre player to be the one to keep doing it, because somehow we don't have this like this trust. Meanwhile, like within all of us is literally our prayer. Like we are our own prayer. And if we and we could begin small with developing the trust within this. One of the I won't go into the exercise right now, but it's really starting with the small stuff and actually creating a dialogue with yourself. I talk to myself out loud all the time. It's very helpful to hear not just ruminations in my mind, but to hear with my senses, to actually hear what I'm saying to myself and say, what should I do? Why do I feel this way? Why suddenly I'm about to text this person and like my heart, I can literally feel my body like getting tense right now. What's that
Yeah.
about? Should I not be inviting this person right now? Is there something I need to understand around this, right? So uh, as we cultivate, as we begin to question w- everything that we're doing and just asking, literally just asking out loud or in your mind if you're like with people, but like, how should I respond to this text message? And you will we all hear what we should be saying. Now, I can't tell you how many times I heard what I should like write. And then my mind is like, but is that too, am I sounding too earnest? Am I sounding too whatever, right? Then I judge it and then I change it. And then I wish, usually, I usually wish that I just went with my initial, the instinct, the purity of what came through first. And so what we can do is as we create like little like exercises around developing conversation with the voice, and then we follow it even if it doesn't make sense to the mind, and it can start small. And we start small. We listen to what doesn't kind of make sense. Okay, you want me to say that? Like, God, this sounds so weird. Like, okay, I'll say it. And somehow that opens up something else, right? And you're like, whoa, okay, like that result. And so I
Right.
at least from anecdotal experience, and certainly people I've spoken to, the more that we listen to the voice, the more that we're rewarded for listening. There's almost
Mm-hmm.
always a reward for listening to the part of us that like knows the truth for us. And so when you follow that, then you begin to cultivate trust in that unseen, trust in ourself ultimately. And then when the ask gets bigger and bigger and bigger, hey, Jonathan, you should start a podcast.
Right.
Uh, all the things, right? But you probably were already creating a relationship between following like your gut instinct, following what that was saying. So when the voice starts to ask for larger leaps of faith, we're willing to take it. But at every step, every time we level up in the level of what's being asked, we're always going to be confronted with the same bullshit. Oh my God, like, are you sure? Like, all the self doubt. A lot of times, like, I feel like a pull against me wanting to expand. I can feel
Yeah.
contraction against like some part of myself that wants to stay safe and small and doesn't want this next level of expansion. But ultimately, I hug that part of myself and I'm like, I know you're scared. Cool. Me too. But like, should we hold hands and do it together? And then you move forward, you see, like, okay, everything's okay. Then you kind of acclimate to that level of trust surrender. You're like, damn, this just keeps working. Amazing. And then, boom, something else bigger. Uh-oh, faced with all of our bullshit again. And then we keep going through it. And it's just step by step by step. And I wish it just suddenly got easier, but I think it's within the contrast and the crunchiness is actually how we grow, right? So without,
Yeah.
if it's just cruising all the time, there's no reason to change. It's no reason to
Right.
continue to evolve. And so
Hmm.
I think it's just now letting go of our resistance to the uncomfortable asks at times and going like, I've been here though. I've been here and I know that only bomb awesome things have happened before. Or even if it didn't turn out quite like I thought, it actually still did open up something that I could have never thought.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the feelings in the body, because for me, that's been the biggest, I'm going to call it like a compass point, right? Of like, where's the compass pointing, and how do I follow it?
Hmm.
And that's where I first started to notice it, was like, I know what it's like to be living in the head. I know what it's like to have all these voices and the committee that's like, judging and critiquing and telling me this, telling me that, right? And it's gotten me, pretty far. But once the heart and the intuition came in, the first way that I noticed it was the lack of the voice.
Hmm.
It was like the stillness.
Yeah.
And yet there was still perfect confidence in the feeling in the body.
Hmm.
And it was so, I mean, I literally remember sitting in my therapist's office, just being like, I have no idea what's happening right now. This feels so weird. And literally he said, well, you've spent your whole life listening to the head. What would it be like to like give the heart a chance
Yeah.
and like follow that for a second? And I'm like, like it didn't take that much convincing, because I was already there just with that feeling. And
Yeah.
and I find that sometimes with somatic work, right? Like I've had to learn, for some people, and sometimes for myself as well. Like sometimes I'll say, someone will say like, oh, I feel calm. Great. How do you know that? Like, where do you feel that in your body? And
Hmm.
that's like always like a really interesting question, right?
That
And
is.
sometimes it's not, oh, this part of me feels good. Sometimes that knowing is, well, this part that usually feels crappy doesn't feel that way anymore.
Right.
Like I feel a lack of crap, or shittiness or whatever it is, right? And it's like, oh, okay, that can be just as valid a place to start with, oh my God, my heart feels so open, or like I feel so expansive, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's just following those clues, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then the other thing that was really interesting that I thought about what you shared was um the how the ideas and the seeds kind of grow. And that's something like that's been really alive for me lately. Like, just I was thinking about this the other day, and I shared about it on a solo episode of like, well, out of all the ideas that I've had, why is the idea for the current project and the current brand, like, why did that stick?
Right.
Right? Like I've had a ton of ideas, but this one started just like any other one, just like a little seed, like a little idea. I could have totally let it go by and
Hmm.
kept going, but there was something about that that made me go, oh, wait, hold on a second. There's something here. I got to go with this. I got to grab onto it. And to see it now, like a few years later, continuing to grow and blossom and flourish, and like, I feel like there's parts of it that are not me at all. Like I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of riding the wave. I'm just supporting and watering that plant, and putting it in the sun, and singing to it and taking
Hmm.
care of it, right?
Yep.
And it's just going. And as long as I'm there, it's not even like I'm really trying. And not to say that there aren't moments or times where I'm like working really hard or coming up against that discomfort that we were talking about earlier, but there's there's something in that surrender and trusting that everything is working out exactly as it's supposed to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really beautiful. And I think, like you're saying, like there's lots of ideas and things, and I think that's okay too, like there's no there's no wrong direction, really. Like, it's just like experience. So, even if
Yeah.
it's like, okay, try that. I mean, I always say, like, the amount of times I've like fallen forward on my entrepreneurial path is constant, but it's just constant learning. Like, okay, try that. Okay, all right, we'll go over here. And what happened from that? Well, I learned this, and this. I met this person and this person, which I'm very happy I did. Like, there's no
Right.
there's only forward. I think even the idea that
Yeah.
that we're going backwards is just, that's, again, that's like something the mind made up. Like, that's just not
Yeah.
true. Like, just look at nature, like linear time. Like, nope, we're definitely not going backwards. We're only going forwards. And so, I know sometimes it can feel like we're like not moving fast enough, or we feel like we've taken 3 steps back. But I think that's just, I think oftentimes it's, if we, at least when I've felt it, like when I've been in the position of, oh, now I'm 3 steps back, it's, oh, well, because there's a level of mastery around this step that I just haven't
Mm.
quite got
Hmm.
yet. So it's like, for me to succeed, don't just bypass 10th grade and go to 11th grade. You haven't understood, you know, the basics here in 10th grade. And so I think every time that we get kind of like held back, or, like feel like we're moving slowly, or getting like pushed back, it's not out of, you can't do it, or the universe doesn't like you, or anything like that. It's actually like, okay, no, no,
Right.
no. There's opportunities. Like, okay, here we are in the same position again. Like, what are we going to do differently this time? How are we going to move through this? Like, what did we learn the last time? And what's working, what's not working? And so I feel like it's this like constant clarifying of our goals and our values and what we want, our intentions, and ultimately setting us up for success. I always say that, like, I was praying for Trip on This to be an overnight success when I released it, but the truth is, thank God it wasn't, because just from a pure being a public figure, I my from being a private person with a private Instagram account, working in a corporate world, to opening myself up to both the praise, but also the opinions of others, especially when you talk about things like psychedelics. Thankfully, I haven't ran into it too much. I'd say like most everything has been about 98% wonderful. But there is that like 2% of, whether it just has nothing to do with anything, and somebody just, TikTok can be pretty savage. So like an occasional person just talking about, wants to comment on how I look or something, right? Um,
Right.
but that hurts our feelings, like that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And for me, like, I don't think I present as like a sensitive, like I'm a Pisces, but I feel like what you see a lot is my Aquarian, because I Aquarian rising and moon, and that's that's how I come off. But like, I'm actually quite sensitive. So when somebody says something that's hurtful to me, I can feel it. And so moving through that, and now creating from the place, I know one of my prayers currently for myself is, Kat, where are you still holding yourself back? Where are you still being safe because you're afraid of of being chipped away at, critiqued? You know, the more that you're definitive around what you believe, the more that people like to dig in if they don't believe that. And um, I think there was still, and that's been a process of just being like, it's okay. We live in a world that, like, it is impossible. If you look at like the way that even the world, we're polarity, right? The contrast between two opposing forces, men and women, even, like, the whole universe is set up not to be a one-sided thing. And so, obviously when human feelings are involved with that, it's not always easy, but it's this process for me. And had I just been thrust into, oh, now millions of people know who you are, and it's just a numbers game at that point, would you have been ready for all of that? And I can say, like, right now, like, definitely not. Like, I'm so thrilled that my growth and, expansion has is been in the perfect way that my soul needed it, so that I can continue, as it continues to grow, I can hold more of that, and I can step more into myself and be like, Kat, doesn't matter, girl. The more you're yourself, the more you shine, the more that you need to do. And so, yeah, it's just like a point on, like, there's no, not to speed up the journey, There's a reason why it's going
Right.
at the pace that it's going at so that we can be best set up for success ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been something that's been resonating to me on that point, like lately a lot. There, I forget who said it, but I saw something. There was some sort of coach, and they were like, "Well, okay, so picture that you got everything that you say that you want right now. Like, let's say all of a sudden you got 1,000, clients all of a sudden, like, or 10,000 or whatever it is that you're going for, right? Overnight, like, would you actually be ready for that?
Mhm.
And the answer is probably no, right? Like if all of a sudden 1,000 people were like, I want to work with you, I would be
Right.
completely overwhelmed, completely just swamped,
Yeah.
and there's something to not only the journey within, but also being able to know how to deal with that exposure and dealing with all these different personalities and having systems and maybe a team that's supporting you and like helping you not get swamped and all those different things that play into that overall like success and being able to just sit and be okay with where you're at rather than being completely overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree 100%. And yeah, and still just trusting that you're going in the right direction and that maybe even if things aren't moving at the speed that you think that they are, that they're coming in divine timing,
Yeah.
you know. And I love that like that we're speaking about that divine timing as far as like not only within us but with outside of us, right? Like there was this image that came up as you were speaking of like um, a child like looking at a tree in fall or winter and like freaking out like what's wrong with the tree, like all the leaves are falling off, right? Like what's wrong with it?
Mhm.
Just not knowing that it's going to grow back in the spring, more beautiful and more robust and like fuller,
I love
right?
that.
And
Yeah.
we see that in the minimal, we see that in the meta as well, right? Like our breath goes in and out. There's a contraction and an expansion. There's a day and a night. There's these different seasons. And there's something very beautiful about like accepting that and being willing to let go of those moments when we start to contract or when it starts to feel uncomfortable, knowing that the cycle is going to continue
Mhm.
rather than like grasping on, no, I have to hold on to this right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's just like, again, it's like, it's practice, it's like actually
Mm.
just doing it. And there's going to be moments of holding on. And I think it's just like, that is all part of the learning around all of this ultimately. It's just also around like the thing I wrote myself kind of like a life vision, and I kept it very like, it's not as specific as people would think, it's like, you know, it's not like, I hope that this happens or I want this exact thing to happen, because the truth is like, I don't actually know what I want and need for my ultimate happiness, for my ultimate fulfillment, for my ultimate purpose. I could have told
Mm.
you it's to be the biggest podcast host and da 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 da, but is that actually true? Like, is that like, that's just like a thought that my mind had. And so one of the things that I always love to say is, may this life be so far beyond anything I've yet to imagine. May this be so, and allowing myself to actually be guided and to be detoured if I need to be, realizing like, oh, I would have never thought I would have ended up right here, as I just kind of follow that flow in my heart, and realizing like, oh my gosh, in not a million years did I think I would end here, or this opportunity would have come to me. And so being
Mm.
less prescriptive around things and how it has to look. Also, we think about like the incredible intelligence and creativity of nature in this world, that maybe like spirit has so much more of a cool idea than we could ever even conceptualize for ourselves. And so a lot of times when I'm setting intentions, I'm setting them for, you know the highest love, the most joyful, fulfilled, purposeful life of service that I could possibly live, to be in alignment with the truth of where my heart is, and just to allow the unfolding of what is coming through for me. And that unfolding is coming through. I mean, it's such a big part of like where I'm at. My journey is seeing, it first started with psychedelics, but realizing psychedelics is just a piece of the thing that like I really want to do is to help people take their own leap of faith in their life. That's actually why why psychedelics and mushrooms in particular for me, although I do love the other ones as well. Um, I have such reverence and appreciation for them, and why I dedicated so much of my life to them is because they allowed me to see myself so clearly, so that I could take the courageous leap of faith into my own life, and to become the creator. Ultimately, I was the consumer. I worked for somebody else. I was always told what to do and where to be, and I was always stressed and just always looking outside of myself for everything, really. And so that that ultimately, I always say there is no trip on this without psychedelics, because I would have never believed in myself to do it. But you don't need psychedelics to get there, right? Like that to me, all psychedelics for me connected me back to myself, ultimately, the divine spark that I am, the part of me that is so much bigger than I ever knew, truly. I had a mystical experience that also like really just was then it 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 was such a gift, because I was like, oh, I used to always say like, oh, I'm spiritual, I believe there's something more. But when you get to actually experience something that is so much bigger than the mind can conceive, it changes you forever. And so, yeah, it's just like for everyone listening, it's like we set out thinking it's one thing, but really allowing for the seeds of that vision to actually grow. So far, you probably thought you grew like an apple tree, but you're growing an entire vineyard or something, like it's so
Yeah.
it's but we only are given as much vision as what we believe that we could take on. If the vision is so massive from the beginning, and you are just like, am I capable of this? Can I do it? We don't believe we can do it. It's too big. It's too much. Like, so I feel like oftentimes we see like it's a little more narrow when we start, and we see like, okay, like all I saw was podcast when I started. I couldn't see beyond it, because my soul knew, God, there's way more here. There's way more to do, but we're going to give you where you're at in your life with your self beliefs and your self worth and what you got. You can wrap your head around this piece, and then what you're going to discover on this is how much more you actually are. And so I think that's the joyful journey of this whole experience, is all of the miracles and mysteries that are going to unfold for all of us that we could have never saw coming.
I'm just going to let that land for a second because I really have nothing more to add to that. That was just beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that, as far as trusting the leaps that you're taking, as far as not being able to see the whole picture as it's unfolding. And also that very slight perspective shift that psychedelics are just one part of that. They're not the whole thing. I feel like that's something that's been really alive for me during the last year. Um, I went, after I had like a year of like, okay, I'm going to be an integration coach, and I'm marketing myself that way. And I'm trying to really get comfortable with coming out of that closet.
Hmm.
Cause like coming from a corporate environment. And, there were times where like literally I would post something and then I'd be like, is this going to be the thing that gets me fired? Like I'm going to have a meeting with HR and they're going to be like, so let's look at your Instagram. Right.
Right.
And just not knowing like if that was going to happen, but then going and just hold on, let me just reframe this and see that the psychedelics are just one tool out of a whole toolbox.
Mhm.
And they are the path for some people, and they don't have to be, and they're not the end all sort of result, right? So like, um, the Buddha said something like you can use the boat to cross the river, but after you cross the river, don't like keep dragging the boat behind you.
Mm. I
You got to
haven't
leave
heard
it
that
there.
before. I love that.
Yeah. And this year has really shown me that, because like I went to work at a treatment center, and I'm doing a lot of the same things minus the psychedelics that I do with private clients. But obviously I don't go to work and talk about psychedelics. It's like, hey, let's talk about breathing and meditation and regulating your nervous system. And really having these little like mini epiphanies of, oh, wow, the folks in here that I'm working with have a lot of the same goals and intentions and things that they're working on and struggling with as the private client that's like, I'm going to go sit in an ayahuasca ceremony because I can't figure out how to get unstuck. I can't figure out how to stop this behavior. My anxiety is out of control, or I feel like I'm depressed, right? Like maybe they're at different places in the journey, but they're still like they're on similar paths.
Mhm.
And so, okay, well, what would happen if I sort of moved the psychedelic from like the top of the pyramid into just a part of what we're doing here, and like
Mhm.
how that shifted. And that's also been reflected in my own life. I'm always a little cautious as far as the whole sort of cliche of like, like this trip is like 10,000 hours of therapy or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that works for some people. It's not going to work for everyone.
Mhm.
And also, like, what are you doing? Like, there's a reason that you need 10,000 hours, right? Like you have this opportunity to like slowly integrate. You don't have to eat the elephant all at once,
Right,
as
right,
opposed to, okay, now you committed to this. Now your belly is really full, like how are you going to digest?
right.
How are you what are
Yeah,
you going to do with that? So just seeing that there's room for all of it, and that it's all good, it's all perfect
yeah,
in its own way,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's reminding me also of a big piece for me that I don't think I've talked about much on here is just how I also feel that joy is an access point also to healing. And that almost sounds like an oxymoron because there's like I think this idea that like you can't feel joy if you're somehow going through a lot and also that the healing process is only through the tough times. It's only through the
Mm.
eyes closed journeys. It's only through therapy. It's only through slogging it out in the corridors of our own mind. And while, yes, there's definitely time for that, and it's all again, a part of the healing process, joy for me was the way in to the discovery of myself. I had the opportunity to, I was like tripping and dancing. I was like, took mushrooms. It was like only the third time I've taken a little bit of MDMA, and I was watching something, and it was the most, and I was dancing, and I was just with like six other people. So I was like in community, and I just had this cool opportunity to just fully like let myself express in a way where I had never felt like awe and wonder like that. I didn't even know I had the capacity to feel joy like that. I didn't even know I could. And once you realize that what's possible, you don't actually need the substance necessarily to do it. And, my journey with psychedelics began through joy. It was through the
Yeah.
container, as we say, right, of fun. And I'm
Right.
not saying that that is going to be the path for everyone, but what that did was I got to, if you think about how we are when we are in a great mood and we're really like things are going well and you're bubbly and whatnot, the whole world responds differently to you. The whole everything
Mm.
sparkles differently, and the
Mm-hmm.
more that we maintain that, the world mirrors that back to us all the time. And I think that we forget that, like, we're so focused on what we don't want to feel, and we forget how do we want to feel. Like, both are possible. And for myself, it was through joy that I got to see, like, look how good you are in a room. Look at it, like, look at you sparkle like this. I've never seen you like this before. And how everything responds to you differently now. And then through that, I almost backed into all of my stuff that I needed to work on, all of my self-limiting beliefs, all of the shadowy elements of myself that needed to be looked at. But I wasn't even at the place to even know that I needed to actually go and do that. I thought I was okay, like how
Mm.
all that limitation was buried very deep away from my mind. I thought I was confident. I would have told you I'm a confident person. And I mean, I low key, I always kind of knew, like, I was so, like, overly controlled about, like, how I was going to look and da da da, because obviously there wasn't a whole, that was a veneer of confidence. But to my kind of like autopiloted minds, I thought like I was doing pretty well. And so it allowed me to kind of like back into myself once I had already gained that trust also with the psychedelics and the mushrooms and things, that it's like, oh, this doesn't have to be scary. Then I've had some, the trips I'm sure a lot of people have had, like sobbing and bawling and difficult and uncomfortable and all of them and everything in between. But yeah, I mean, joy put me on the path, period. It was actually through joy did I begin to emerge. And so it's just another thing that I'm also wanting to like create is experiences and programs and things of like, what are we doing to cultivate fun, straight up fun in our life? Because without it, we lose that like vitality, that zest, I'm 37 and I love to go dance. And it doesn't have to be dancing for you because it's not for everybody. But a lot of people, whatever, finding like really making a point, like really like as if it's just as important as working out and eating well, is what are you doing for your joy? How are you gifting yourself a good time while we're here? And really, I think through there, it's also that's when ideas come in. That's when new, like, ooh, you know what? Maybe I am passionate about that thing. Because so many people like are like, well, what would I even do if I want to be an entrepreneur? I don't even know what I'm passionate about. Well, start with having fun. Just go out and start doing things that you like. It it's
Mm.
the universe has a way of showing us where we're supposed to be by just being where we'd
Right.
like to be.
Yeah,
Ultimately,
absolutely. Yeah, my girlfriend was saying this a few months ago. She like looked at me one day. We were talking about the podcast, and she said, "You obviously really like doing the podcast." And I said, "Well, yeah." And she's like, "Because you're not making any money on it right now, but you're look at how much energy you're putting into it." I said, "Yeah, I mean, like, obviously at some point it would be great to be making some sort of money from
hmm
it, whether that's coaching clients or people coming to my breathwork circles or, ads or whatever that looks like. But yes, I am having fun with this right now. And I still do want to keep putting my energy into it."
hmm
And that is such a good barometer of like, oh, I'm just following that curiosity, following the just the joy.
yeah,
um
absolutely.
and I think you're speaking to a really important point of all this, however your inner work is looking, whether it's psychedelics or not, which is coming back to this place that there isn't anything wrong with you. And that's, for me, has been one of the most important things that the psychedelics journeys that I've, taken have shown me, is like it takes you back to that primordial purity and that primordial wholeness. It
hmm
like shows you the truth of that that's underneath everything. And then, okay, now when I go back into, Jonathan as a human in the world, then it's like, well, if I'm coming from that place of I'm already whole and I'm working through the things that are trying to sort of prevent me from being in that space all the time, rather than there's something wrong with me that needs to be
I
fixed.
love that.
It's, like
Yeah.
it's like and not to say that there's a bypassing, right? Like you mentioned it at the top when we were sharing your story. Like we have to go through those sticky, icky parts when they come up. We have to be willing to sit with them and not just go, well, I'm just perfect. I'm this primordial perfect being. And
Yeah.
so I can just like stop thinking about this, uncomfortable feeling in my body. No, we got to embrace all of that. But just remembering that we are whole, and that's something that, mushrooms especially has definitely shown me.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, hey, like, and that's why it's good to, for me to come back to it. Like I can tell when it's been too long,
Yeah,
right? Because it's like I almost need that reminder of like, hey, can you just go back through the doorway and like get back to that place where
totally.
everything's all
Totally.
good?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I want to be mindful of the time, so I'm wondering if now would be a good kind of transition point and to talk about something that we've talked a little bit about during this episode and danced around a bit, which is learning to trust your intuition and that inner voice and developing that relationship within yourself. And you had mentioned a practice that the audience could do to develop that.
Yeah. So this is super simple, but start with the grocery store. This is what I would do. So I always like to say I have an intuitive diet, which means that it's going to change. The body's needs are going to change, and it's just a way of kind of like starting to like almost gamify the the experience of like understanding the differences within ourselves. And so what I like to do when I go grocery shopping is instead of just going for all the things I always go for or get, before I get to everything that I'm about to get, I always like ask myself in my head, because I know I'm in the grocery store, I'll be like, should I get this? And I will feel, I'll either hear yes for myself, like I'll either get like a yes, like it just feels like, uh-huh, or I get what feels like a complete stillness of like nothing. And I'll have to stop. And this is again, this is practice, right? So it's like working with like, what am I listening to the pull? Because it's subtle when we start to do it, but it's like there's the way that I would describe it for myself is there isn't a resounding yes. Certain things, yes. And then I'll get to something, should I get this? And it'll confuse me because I'm like, it's something I always get. And I'm like, and I'll ask again, do you want me to get this? And then sometimes I'll get like a definitive, like, not this time. Give this a break next time. Maybe next time. And so there's this, we are bringing consciousness into everything that we're doing. And the more that we are conscious around everything we're doing, that's really what it is. Consciousness exercises. Are we on a habitual pattern at, let's just say with a grocery store, could be anything though, right? I do it with text messages too
Right.
now. A text comes in, a good practice is, what should I say? Instead of, I think we all know that before you even think, there's, especially if you have a shorthand with people that you know really well, and like you're not even thinking, it
Right.
doesn't matter what you say because like it's like, but
Yeah.
especially like with certain things come in is like actually creating that dialogue, creating conscious behavior through your day as much as you possibly can. And again, like I'd say, like start next time you're at the grocery store. You might forget sometimes, but every time that you can remember and not just grab things without thinking about it, because that's when we're unconscious, right? If we're suddenly just throwing things in our cart and we didn't even, there wasn't even a thought of whether we should get that or not, no problem, right? We all do that. But that's the invitation then to go like, oh, okay, let me create a dialogue with my spirit ultimately, even around the little things. Because once we start doing that, it's like it's habit forming. So then you start to do it with bigger things. How should I respond to this email? Should I respond right now? Do you want me to post this episode right now? What time should I post this? Right? Like literally,
Mm-hmm.
if we realize our ace in the hole is actually the inner voice, if that is our MVP all day long and wants to help literally at every moment, let's use him or her, right? As opposed to our mediocre, loud not mediocre, I don't want to call it, but I think of myself like my mind is just the more flawed, loud thinks it knows better, and half the time it does not, like it just,
Right.
and so that's really the practice I would give to everyone is like almost gamify it, have fun with it because it's going to become part of you. And once it becomes part of you, then you are moving through the world very consciously. Then when text messages come in, instead of reacting, then you're really responding because you're like, how am I feeling based on this? What happened in my body just now? I got this. I'm
Right.
feeling rejected somehow, even though it doesn't make sense. It's completely, this text makes sense. Okay, they're busy, this and that, but my feelings are hurt right now. And I have to sit and be like, are your feelings hurt right now? Yes. Do you know, like go through the whole process? Do you want me to respond right now? No, let it be. Okay, it's time to respond. I'll sometimes get like in the middle of yoga and I'll all of a sudden hear it's time to send that email. And I'll just like pause, send, because I keep the funnel of information open all the time. And that, my friends, that has been the way that I have not, I used to run into jagged edges constantly. It's how I learn is through running into something and realizing like, oh, that's a wall. Okay, well, let me try a right and then see. And what I've noticed is I'm hip checking and shoulder checking myself way less now because before I even walk straight into that wall without ever having given it a thought, I ask, should I be going that way? And then once I'm told, actually, take, throw it on pause for a second. You might want to go right. Then I'm like, oh, nice. Thanks. I almost smashed my face again, but I'm glad I didn't this time. I hope these analogies are helpful, but I just figured out how
Yeah,
to
I mean,
explain it.
what I'm hearing is like listening to what the body is telling you, right?
Hmm.
Like I know, just thinking about the grocery store, there's I've noticed lately, maybe not lately, but for a while, like if I'm upset, if I'm not in a good place, if I'm not taking care of myself, or there's something like really stressful that I'm going through, there are things at the grocery store that like I'm like, oh, I should get that.
Hmm.
And then sometimes like when I'm able to hold that stress and sort of like stay with my vision, there'll be time where it's like it's almost like no, I can feel the urge for that coming up,
Hmm.
right? I can I'm not shaming myself anymore for like, oh God, like what are you doing? Right. But it's like, no, not today. Like
Yeah.
we definitely don't need that. And then there's days where it's like, oh man, this would really make me feel better right now. Okay, would it? Let's dive a little bit deeper into that,
And
right?
and sometimes like
Um,
I'll have like spirit say to me, like, I'd be like, I just want this iced coffee right now. And then they'll be like, "Do you need it?" And I'd be like, "No, but I'd really love it." They're like, "Well, enjoy it
right.
then." Because
Yeah, yeah,
there's nothing
totally.
enjoy it. It's just, do you need it's just like those kind of like little reminders. And then when you just go, "No, no, but I'd really like that now." And they're just like, "Okay,
Yeah,
you're free to do what you want." And so
right,
I think that definitely is like the balance of like sometimes it's a resounding yes, sometimes it's like, and then sometimes it's like I follow that, and other times I'm like, "But can I?" Like, "Is it cool?"
right,
Sometimes I'll get like, "Cat, you've had enough sugar, like, really do not." And I'm like, "Okay, fine."
right.
Like, for whatever reason, they're like, you're gonna crash and not feel good after this, like, we're no." And then other times they're like, "Had it, girl," you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the difference between the intention and just noticing what's there in the body, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me getting that treat. If I'm getting that treat because there's something inside that feels really uncomfortable that I'm trying to get away from, that's the time where it's like, well, hold on a second. And I can feel the difference between that in my body.
Mhm.
And so I think for those, that are listening to this, that's where it starts for me, is just noticing what's happening in my body, noticing like what why am I being drawn towards this, and being able to sit with myself and ask that, and also not judge, not shame, not, tell myself some sort of story.
100%.
I deserve that treat. If I'm going towards it because I'm trying to get away from something, well, maybe there's a different way of working with that,
Yes.
in this moment.
Mhm. Well
Yeah.
said.
Well, in terms of, trusting my intuition, I think that this was a great decision. because, that's definitely what I did in terms of this podcast, in terms of reaching out to you, like literally it was, there was something that you had posted and everybody in the comments were people that had been on the podcast previously. It was like Aaron Dumay and Caesar
Oh,
and
cool.
Quest. And then I'm like looking at your podcast and I'm like, oh, and you've had Acacia on and Beth and all these people that I know. Okay, there's something there. I'm trusting the intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just hearing your story, the stories that you shared during our chat today, there's been so much that I've resonated with as far as, how your journeys have affected you, how they've influenced the direction that you're going in, the way that you're trusting spirit, um, those ego death experiences. I mean, we could definitely talk for longer about that,
Mm-hmm.
and just like the way that you're navigating through the world, with that balance of trust and also taking action and direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? The confidence. So I really appreciate, you taking the time to chat with us and be here on the Vital Point. I appreciate myself for trusting that intuition to reach out, and I hope that we can do it again sometime.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. I did too, really. And I loved your points too. Like we were saying before, podcasters, all of your points like perfectly was like just so wonderfully leading for me too. And like also for your audience to hear like to the oftentimes similar ideas, but then put into different words helps it land in different ways. And so just like kudos to you. Congratulations on how many episodes you have. I know how much time, work, focus that takes. And so really just like it's amazing work and keep it up because you're very good at it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. So, if you want to connect with Kat, there's the Trip on This podcast. There's
Mhm.
the Life with Kat podcast. What else should people know, or how else can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so those are my two podcasts. Trip on This is my psychedelic podcast. It's everywhere there's that you get your podcast. It's also on YouTube. My website is triponthispodcast.com. And Life with Kat Walsh is a personal journal style podcast where I talk straight to camera just about this whole spiritual entrepreneurial journey. That's also my main website, which is lifewithkatwalsh.com. There's just kind of like my story, my podcasts, information about my trip companion work that I do, voiceover work that I do. So that's kind of like really Kat in its totality more. And that's it. I'm on socials, Life with Kat Walsh with a K. And I'll Jonathan, I'll send you all the info as well for that.
Awesome. So, just to close, if we had to mention a vital point for today, and it doesn't have to be the meta, it could just be something that's like alive for you in this moment, or that's come up through this conversation, or maybe it is something that's more, meta. What would you leave us with as our vital point?
Listen to that little voice within yourself that knows the truth for you. Period. If you get the feeling, if you get the hunch that you should be doing something, trust it. Trust it. That's the
Awesome.
ace in the hole.
That's the ringer.
That's the
I
ringer.
like that. I like that. I like that analogy. I think I'm gonna keep digesting that one a little bit, because
Yeah.
I kept thinking of like that, like the manager that's like, well, this guy, we don't really like him, but he always gets a single. So like,
Yeah.
just keep putting him in there instead of like the guy that takes the big swings.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I love that.
It's
Well,
hilarious.
awesome, Kat. Thank you so much for being here on the Vital Point podcast, and it's just been a pleasure.
Awesome. Likewise. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right.
Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
So make sure you sign up for my newsletter at bluemagicalchemy.com to be the first to get updates, exclusive content, and insights delivered straight to your inbox. It's a fantastic way to stay connected and keep the cultivation of wisdom going. When you sign up, I'll send you a free guide to using breathwork for integration as a way to show my gratitude for your support. Remember, it's not about the method you choose or the pace at which you travel. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself in practice. As the saying goes, it's not the destination, but the journey that truly matters. and I'm honored to accompany you on yours. So please don't hesitate to reach out, connect, share your journey, the successes and challenges alike. I'm just an email, DM, or review away. Let's journey, grow, and transform together. Thanks so much again for tuning in. Until the next episode, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing, because that's the vital point.